Welcome to the Daily Dispatch. For our first dispatch, we'll be covering the news of the Indian government banning a BBC documentary, spotlighting Prime Minister Modi and his role in the Gujarat Riots in 2002. For our second headline, we'll cover Afghanistan, where a non-Muslim delegation from the United Nations is seeking to find a headway on women's rights. And we'll also be covering news of Iran condemning the European Parliament's designation of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as terrorist organization, an in-principle agreement between Russia and Pakistan to import the Russian oil, and the Lunar New Year being celebrated in China with zero COVID restrictions having been lifted. We're here to give you the news and to help you infer the world around you. I'm Tayyaba Nisar Khan, and here is your Daily Dispatch. The Indian government has issued directions for blocking multiple videos and tweets sharing links to the BBC's documentary, India, the Modi Question. The documentary critically examines Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's role in the Gujarat pogrom of 2002, when he was the province's chief minister. Now, the Gujarat Riots started in 2002 when a train carrying Hindu pilgrims was set on fire. It set off a wave of hatred and violence against Muslims across the state. More than 1,000 people died, the majority of them Muslims. The riots were exceptional for their numbers, ferocious brutality, and ruthlessness, including mass rapes and burning people alive. As the violence against Muslims continued for 3 days, officials did little to stop it. As Chief Minister of the state, Narendra Modi was accused of abetting the pogrom. Now, however, courts later exonerated him on these charges, saying there is no prosecutable evidence against Modi. Kanchan Gupta, the senior advisor at the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, said that the Indian government has ordered to take down multiple videos of the BBC documentary and more than 50 tweets with links to the YouTube videos. Justifying the decision, he called BBC's documentary wild propaganda and biased and reflects a colonial mindset. The documentary has not been made available in India by BBC, but some YouTube channels have uploaded it. The government has instructed YouTube to block the video if uploaded again. The Indian decision to block the documentary has come under criticism by some intellectuals of India and editors, calling it an attempt to gag freedom and only allow narratives that fit with the incumbent government's vision. Next, a United Nations delegation that held talks with the senior Taliban officials in Afghanistan today reported headway has been made on women's rights. The United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed also cautioned that much remains to be achieved. This high-level meeting took place amid the widespread criticism of Taliban's move of banning women from universities, followed by a ban on women working in the NGOs. Now, the United Nations delegation met with the cabinet members, including the Foreign Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Minister of Refugees and Returnees. The all-Muslim delegation stated there has been some progress. Some exemptions have been made to the edicts that have covered the health sectors. Now, referring to the resumption of work by 3 NGOs last week. However, the United Nations is currently viewing this as a minor improvement in overall conditions, labeling the progress as merely opening up a crack, and hoping that eventually an agreement can be reached where women are allowed to return to schools and the workplace. The Taliban government, on the other hand, has accused the international community of attempting to engineer social change in the country through these NGOs, suggesting that the Taliban will allow organizations to operate if they align with the country's values. However, with the Taliban coming under increasing criticism from countries and international bodies around the world, including the OIC, which expressed concern about restrictions on women and issued a statement marking the happenings in Afghanistan against the Holy Quran and Islam. It is increasingly evident the Taliban will have to reassess their policies on women's rights if they expect engagement, recognition, and financial support from the international community. In the meanwhile, as Afghanistan continues to face a humanitarian crisis, the United Nations delegation has warned that isolating women will also isolate Afghanistan, leaving the country facing a terrible crisis it cannot afford to tackle alone. Now we'll give you an update from the European Parliament, which has passed a resolution calling to recognize Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organization. The move is significant, as Iran has come under increasing criticism by the European states for suppressing peaceful protests for women's rights and the sale of drones to Russia. Iran has condemned the move, Tehran says that the IRGC is the world's counterterrorism organization, and it played a significant role in defeating the terrorist groups in the Middle East. By declaring it a terrorist organization, Europe is shooting itself at the foot. The US had already blacklisted the organization, and it was one of the contentious issues between the parties during informal nuclear negotiations. The resolution comes as nuclear talks remain in limbo. The European members of P5+1 have been in favor of reviving the Iran nuclear deal and have diplomatically engaged with Tehran to find a path to resurrecting the deal. However, the recent Iran protests, along with the European Parliament's resolution, will likely further complicate the nuclear talks. Also on the dispatch, on Friday, Pakistan and Russia decided to sign an agreement by late March this year for the supply of Russian oil and other petroleum products to Pakistan at discounted rates. The two sides have suggested the agreement will be signed once the technical issues such as insurance, transportation, and payment mechanisms are all finalized. Here are the key takeaways from this development. 1. There are reports that Russia has agreed to receive the payments in the currency of any friendly country. With Pakistan in the midst of balance of payment crisis and foreign exchange reserves as low as $4.6 billion, this will be a critical boon for the country, with energy purchases making up the largest chunk of the import bill for the government of Pakistan. 2. This move comes as a parallel to India and China, with both countries significantly increasing their dependence on Russian oil since the start of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. As Russia continues to face sanctions from the West, it is likely Moscow will continue to look towards South Asia as a growing market for its oil exports. And finally, the Intergovernmental Commission, where the agreement in principle took place, also saw forward movement on the issues of improving the trade, including through barter, regional integration, and Eurasian connectivity. During the last 2 years, leaning on its new national security policy, Pakistan has moved to improve the connectivity with the Central Asian states, and increased cooperation with Russia is a welcome step towards allowing Pakistan to achieve its goal of economic diplomacy and regional connectivity. And lastly, China and other East and Southeast Asian states are celebrating the Lunar New Year today. It usually happens between late January and early February, on the day of the second new moon after the winter solstice. It is associated with the old agricultural tradition of ancient China, when the farmers would look to the moon for guidance on when to sow and harvest the crops. With the lifting of the zero-COVID policy, people across China will be able to celebrate the Lunar New Year without the hassle of quarantine, social distancing, and masks for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Concerns regarding the spread of the virus due to the mass movement of people have been raised by the health experts. However, the Center of Disease Control in China says that a large-scale COVID-19 surge is unlikely because already 80% of the population was infected during the latest wave, along with a significant segment of the population having been vaccinated. We wish all of our Chinese and East Asian fellows a Happy New Year. That's all, folks. We'd be happy to receive your feedback and suggestions. We'll be back tomorrow with more bite-sized news that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the country, the region, and the globe. I'm Taliban Khan, and this was your Daily Dispatch.